Good day, dear friends. So 1224, after 5 years stay in Sultavola land, is Muslim Khan returned to Mongolia after defeating the Khwarezm state and subdued Central Asia. C3. The question which should have been resolved. The first question is what to do with all of the conquered lands. The case in what Genghis Khan did not create the state, not the empire under Genghis Khan in Angola. Was not empire fixed. Mongolia was the people's army. He created an army, and for many of its indicators, many of manifestation, as we have repeatedly said, it was quite a modern army, or well, at least modern in the spirit of the 18th and 19th centuries. Many things that the Mongols deliberately tried on in the strategy of the European war skills will overtake only in the 19th century. It was the army, it was for the war, and lived until she was fighting, because there is no economic. The basis of this army was not if there was no tax, but Khan really introduced one tax. Their one sheep out of 100 could pick up for state purposes. But this is of course absolutely not serious tax to include on one Mongolian land. Take it, it is impossible. Therefore, it is the army of the people's army was supported by the conquest and robbing other nations by taking production on the war and the sides. The war continued. Genghis Khan had no problems with the economy, only stopped a problem appear. But this coherent picture of where the Mongol army is, their whole life is war, did not fit the conquered peoples that actually to do with them. That northern Chinese who conquered, here see all sorts of varieties of UL and their lesbian Muslims. They were subjected to rob them, but it seems like they already unfair obeyed what to do and how to do it later. I am the king to conquer the empire of sitting on a horse. It is possible to control the empire of sitting on a horse. Cannot. Genghis Khan decided the question. He loved the war, he lived for war, and he said that the greatest enjoyment and pleasure for her husband lies in the fact to suppress, excite, defeat the enemy, to pull it from its roots, to capture all that he has, to get him married women to give, and tears pour to sit on it, good on smooth groups to turn burns, and perfectly dashing husband night bedding for sleep, watch rosots vetnai on their cheeks and kissing them, and them sweet lips the color of cherry berry suck. This famous aphorism of Genghis Khan, which often results, and it corresponds to the actual thoughts this man, and here he was doing it. He fought, captured prey, suppressed, indignant, and took women. Wonder how think modern demographers now living on earth. 16 million descendants of Genghis Khan's most successful manufacturer in man. The history of the world has done its work, but conquered again, returning that. Then to do what you can first. Interim administration in China, for example, when it rose and became to manage civil affairs. Spruce teach the king, a famous Chinese dynasty. Then do scientists, sage, really talented administrator for Central Asia. There ruled financial affairs, charisma, ski merchant Mahmud. I am a doctor, and the Nestorians filling. They hated each other, but both are well versed in finance and decision of Genghis Khan charging the collection of taxes, respectively, and the civil power of merchants was very a wise decision, because in addition to merchants who understands the economy, and they really collect full control what particular the civil proceedings, but to the extent to which the ministers of finance can to establish, given that their lord in the military and the masters of the smaller they are too military, and they need this money for the army for military purposes. In principle, this system was temporary. When Genghis Khan the issue of exploitation conquered peoples were not resolved, he left it to his successor, the guide and Kagan, but Genghis Khan hoped that he will be able to solve it, because what if he's immortal, being illiterate nomads who do not read books? He certainly is not, could not suspect, or rather let's say like every ignorant or uneducated people kiss their talents, and good luck will rise an incredible. He started to believe that he is the chosen one. Dormant Muslim Imam in Bukhara said that he was the scourge of God sent to you for your sins, for mortal sins that he collect on YouTube. Why he have to die? He began to think seriously about immortality. This problem began to agitate him as he's such a great Genghis Khan, which is such a wonderful well. Risen from rabbit to the ruler of the world, for the floor shaker the universe did he too. Will die a lot of cases, and the older I got the often these thoughts visited him. And he was fascinated by the idea of finding immortality. And ancient periodically covered different tyrants of the great rulers knew about it that. What the Pope 250 years believed the Mongols, and scary interested in this a man. And was sent to Europe ambassadors and spy to join with him in contact. And learn the secret of immortality, also learned that living in China Dolsky. The hermit Chan a little, which supposedly holds the secret to immortality, Taoism in general, interesting religion. That speculated she thrust people to the marvelous Rod writes. It's all in the battle produces barely a little website, which is the time recommended Chun. Genghis Khan's rumored you don't know him personally. When I met him the what box. Let's move on. In fact the scammer and Vesistveni nothing about Buddhism and critical Buddhism in the Taoist teachings, lion, greedy and well, in short, a charlatan. And here, I wished that at the time recommended that this Chinese Genghis Khan, and very bad they were treated, but at this point, and to learn, and was not in the office the Mongol ruler. When he found out that Genghis Khan not reading, but how could he to read is not the grants, were a little bit signed a decree. Very Tikhon of print imperial sealed without reading it, because it read he couldn't have her learn. And here the time was near him, and there Chungchen wrote that only his followers' own religion be exempt from all fire. And so when he gets back to China and back he came flying on wings. That Genghis Khan he was traveling with 2 years stops back with frightening speed. Mongolian post horses imperial mail quickly. Yes. There is this decree resulted in the fact that hundreds of thousands of people instantly turned into Russism or study, and was just beside myself, but managed to overrule only when X does not. And in short, this was the story of Genghis Khan with immortality. He was not sad, and you had to admit that. The Chungchen rights of immortality does not exist. And then in front of him was the third question. Okay, with the conquered lands, what to do? He don't know. Nothing. Immortality get 3. The question of what do we have? Lady quarrels of his sons between them. By this occasion already got it pretty during the charisma sky of the company. But what do the Mongols? There was a custom according to which man is heir to his youngest son of a carpenter in Europe. And the Middle East is not over, not the birthright, not the youngest son of the Mongols inherits the property and power. Father, why is this a very reasonable institution in general? Because, well, the older children grow up quite quickly at this time. The father is still in power, but the eldest son is already beginning to feel burdened by the file and wants to rule there himself. The problem of the princes who are fighting there, and who are typical for European dynasties, is Paul the first time he fought against Catherine to because I'm sorry, it's been 40 years and the grandmother is still ruling here. Well, I want to do it myself, but I hope I can't imagine anything at all in the English royal house, where Elizabeth is 95 years old. Poor Carl is probably already tired of waiting for his turn to come. It's time for him to retire long ago. And the Mongols were doing well in this matter. The older children are fighting, and the younger one gets a yurt as a father's task believed in his youth. Here are clouds of Chagatai in children and Tulan for son. But the youngest son could not be the heir in any way because he was half the world of a whale. And you are the worst enemies, and there was an appropriate attitude towards them. Besides, Chagatai constantly reproached the elder Joki that world was a child's world, and then you understand, not at all. The whale just fell and died where it was impossible for Khan to do this, but besides, Kraft was still a child, and therefore he understood with some difficulty that after the post of a young empire, handing power to a child was not an option. He was a smart man. He would grow up and take part in adulthood, or rather, becoming a young man. He would take part in a campaign against Russia and die in Russia under the cold. So his fate was sad. His mother really wanted Holland Khatun to be a beauty, a smart bitch, and she did her best. Son progressed mean that she will rule states, but it's here if anyone can promote. But not with this man as Genghis Khan, who looked at women as a tools for fun. So for him, it was not just, it is impossible that such an option. Wouldn't even consider it a symbol of male sexism, and why he hates modern glad fin. All sorts of other dumb girls, worse because its super successful man is such a manly man. Transitioned women treated in this way, so there is no Kolka, but jokey to independent, and then he older, and Mongolia is no right of primogeniture. And then the contour of you, and he has it would be not younger than that is. It is the law is broken, and in addition Tula differed drunkenness. As Genghis Khan Don tried to stop this evil among the Mongols, drunk Mongol natural disaster. The saying is because of the nature of biological Mongoloid race, particularly subject to Derek almost said gene alcoholism, but if they have something in the genes, they do not like the alcohol. Drunk Mongol Yakut drunk and Indians, that catastrophe. They drink too much, well, just hear foo with one spit, literally. They are very easily susceptible to this trouble. Failure of the state were well aware that alcoholism is a disaster, and punishment in wait for drunkenness was a simple death. But he knew that then you have to execute all of the Mongols, and he has made a law. What if the person is drinking 3 times a month? Well, that's good things, all 3 times together. If drunk twice a month, and it is even better if once. Revenge is well aware that alcoholism is a disaster, and punishment in wait for drunkenness was a simple death. But he knew that then you have to execute all of the Mongols, and he has made a law. What if the person is drinking 3 times a month? Well, that's good things, all 3 times together. If drunk twice a month, and it is even better if once. Revenge is, in general, for 700 years, they guarded a huge area around Burkhan Koldu mountain and further to where Genghis Khan assured himself to bury it. This territory was declared a protected area. No one lived there. There was a guard there, and now no one is allowed there. In general, Genghis Khan was buried, and since then there has been a legend that a huge treasure was buried with him, that all those who buried him were killed. Then those who killed those who buried him were killed. Then those who killed those who killed those who kept him. And so on, 3 times 7 times. The night was certainly full. All this was done in order to scare off those who wanted to plunder the tomb, but in fact, the search for the tomb is still going on. Russian graves were found a long time ago in the Soviet Union. The tomb was found on the territory of the Asa, as Genghis Khan's own birthplace was on the territory of the USSR and now Russia. 7 kilometers from the Russian-Mongolian border in Dilimbor, according to my average, which turned out to be quite well-informed sources. Grave on the territory of the Asa, as Genghis Khan's own birthplace was on the territory of the Asa, and now Russia, 7 kilometers from the Russian-Mongolian border in Dilimbor. Such Genghis Khan was born, and he's also buried there somewhere in the vicinity. And the grave has indeed been classified. There are no external signs that there is a secret place on the Mongolian side of the border where the graves are located. En female Jack of the dynasty the Great Khans from Genghis there and grave. Not this Kabuki Natasha Iwash, and nothing in this tomb there, because census channel Osiris the Great Dilek to be buried without any treasure. No. How Kiro laughed at those who then come and to sack him now is ordered to carve the tomb inscription, that whoever was the person, I know you will come Yakir or, and the king who conquered the Persians. The state will not deprive me of my coffin, left my only treasure, and in this coffin there was nothing. And when Alexander the Great is saw and ordered that tomb to restore it, is still the way Voronin, there is about the same. Genghis Khan did well, because the Mongols believed that this is a holy man and found nothing. There they asked to do it, he'd and relevant authorities. We have closed the whole thing, but also understand there are the form of a legend about that, but it is not necessary to touch all that is not to stir. And when the tomb Timur has revealed the great patriotic war, so there was such an order to close all, destroy all the information, to withdraw and let mulk fact that there is one. I found another shoot down fools that don't state only what is the role of Genghis Khan in the history of the world, that he left in short. Genghis Khan created the modern world. There is a book by the British historian Genghis Khan and the creation of the modern world, because it was he who united China with Europe within one operating line of one of the theatre of operations and one of the political space, as it is now said, and it was Genghis Khan created the Mongolian world empire, paved the trade routes across Eurasia, initiated cravings Europeans to travel to the great geographical discovery. Marco Polo was only one, but Columbus was traveling across the Atlantic to look for the country of the great Khan. He looking for Mongolian, held in China and treasure each. And thus, the drive gave impetus to the process, which led to the globalization of humanity to do it could, and then only because Mongolia was a huge economic powerful China, that is, there were resources which enabled him to carry out for the first time in world history that never no one managed to combine all the great steppe from Hingan Mountains and the Danube. That was the size the Mongol Empire took its greatest prosperity. The truth is not in Genghis Khan's late, but otherwise no X over the process started and the foundation was laid. And he made another conquered China. Mongol, they conquered Europe. But because from their point of view, because ancient times there were two centers of civilization of the ancient Greco-Roman and Oriental Chinese, they balance each other. Then the ancient Greco-Roman collapsed and the Chinese remained in the Middle Ages. The development of Chinese civilization created an economic base for the emergence of the military of the Mongol Empire, managed to conquer half the world. And when the Mongols came to Europe, they found a dirty city barbarism. The backwardness of the country, sparsely populated country, is still angry and bite the coconut, and so they shrugged their shoulders, turned around, and went back sty. But if there was the Roman Empire in the time of Guna ran from China to Europe and saw, and the period where Pounce began to win, and the Mongols would also be the case from the call will be nothing. Why not? One hears a version that thought was always the joke, of course. But every joke there is a joke, share all the rest of the truth, that such a role. Genghis Khan in the history of the Mongols, he is the father of the nations. That Genghis Khan formed from the scattered tribes of different languages. The Mongolian nation was formed, and the Mongolian people were united. However, the Mongolian people were not united under the leadership of Genghis Khan, who was an illiterate nomad. Fighting sooner or later had to stop because the main question conquered Milan decide. When you started to solve, then I will tell you how it will be. From the Mongol Empire quickly began to turn in one case feudal country with a friend in all this bureaucratic or military system. Genghis Khan was unnecessary and will cease to exist here. But the military welcome propaganda which he so successfully tried on in order to paralyze the will to resist the Chinese, the Tangut varieties all of Russian people. Well, here it is a black legend about the horrors perpetrated by the Mongols. Writes hundredfold exaggerated form came to the audience. They actually worked, especially Sabyatai Bagata, differed in murderous violence against conquered peoples, but first, because he walked in the avant-garde, is often no time was no one, therefore, if there wouldn't be around and you and or of fear and terror as he can win well. And Genghis Khan 100k, the strategic scale was in the same position as Freedom Bagata. You're the Western campaign, he spread this black legend remained, and for us, the Mongols is the countless hordes who happened. I trample this as locust which rob destroys all the wiring and so forth nonsense. But that's nonsense tenacious. Therefore, Genghis Khan, though parallel 16 million descendants, but his memory was desecrated legends. which he himself has created, and only today is the 21st century in Mongolia, of course. But in Russia, the efforts of Russian scientists of the Eurasian School, Savitsky Trubetskoy Vernadsky Gumilev lie in Kazakhstan in modern Tatarstan, where the correct positions adhere to often, but not always, people who are in power know how to extract from the past lessons in favor of the state not to harm him. That the efforts of these people, the name of Genghis Khan now, is not that separated him. These here know about TV show Butterflies, as the legend simply flax. Is where you Yakut what to throw on my grave a lot of garbage, but the wind of history. All this would end, and we see that in general, yes, so it is with Genghis Khan, same, only temporary. As much more than still all for today, but not everyone Mongolian the saga. With the death of Genghis Khan, the history of the Mongol conquests is far from over. From you Alexander Macedonian is after Alexander's death. It all fell apart, and even Genghis Khan, and the vlog will be a great Kagan, which will be subject to all the lands from the Adriatic Sea to the shores Japan. So we still have something to tell. Subscribe to the channel while by art. That means goodbye to the Mongovi vlog will be a great Kagan, which will be subject to all the lands from the Adriatic Sea to the shores Japan. So we still have something to tell. Subscribe to the channel while by art. That means goodbye to the manga.